The audition phase of The Voice's 28th season, the blind auditions were illuminated from above by a canopy of lights, each beam a quiet promise of dreams that were on the verge of unfolding. Jazz McKenzie was standing in the wings backstage, her heart pounding in her chest like the beat of a kick drum. With locks that cascaded over her shoulders, a bright yellow sundress that appeared to collect sunlight, and eyes that shone with the kind of optimism that could illuminate even the darkest of nights, she was a picture of gentle flame at the age of 22. Jazz, who was originally from New Orleans, grew up immersed in the rhythm of the city. Her upbringing was a college of second-line parades, church choirs, and late-night jam sessions that took place at her uncle's jazz club. She was here tonight to take her spot, not only as a singer, but as a storyteller with the ability to create magic out of thin air with her voice. 22-year-old Jazz McKenzie, hailing from New Orleans, Louisiana, the host announced, their voice rising above the murmur of the crowd. Jazz was lifted onto the stage by the crowd's enthusiastic cheers, which washed over them like a warm wave. The subtle squeaking of her sneakers on the glossy floor was audible. The shoes were white, scuffed, and decorated with musical notes that had been painted by hand. In spite of the fact that the butterflies in her stomach were wreaking havoc, she made an adjustment to the microphone, her fingers remaining firm. The 4 scarlet chairs were oriented in such a way that the people sitting in them, Michael Bublé, Reba McEntire, Niall Horan, and Snoop Dogg, looked like they were judges presiding over a mythical court. Their ears were attuned to something that was not visible. The nerves were met with a subdued act of insurrection in the form of Jazz's smile. "This one is for my city," she added, her voice echoing the lilt of the swamp. "And for every heart that has ever danced in the dark." The music started with a sensuous piano theme that flowed out like a river at nightfall. A brushed snare and a bass line that hummed with soul joined in with the melody. She had selected "At Last" by Etta James, which was a daring decision because it is a hallowed scripture in the gospel of soul, but Jazz had no intention of trying to imitate it. Her purpose was to conceive of new ideas and possibilities. In the end, her voice entered like a gentle breeze through an open window. It was soothing, but it also demanded attention. Each note that she sang was imbued with the honeyed warmth that is characteristic of her ancestry. It was not Etta's voice. It did not attempt to sound like her either. Jazz's alto was a living entity, deeply anchored in jazz but bursting into blossom with flourishes of gospel and a bluesy edge that screamed of heartbreak in the dead of night. The initial line wrapped itself around the ears of the coaches, and Michael Bublé's head leaned to one side. His fingers froze in midair as though he were tracing the arc of the song. Jazz performed this song in such a way that it felt like a discussion rather than a cover. He was intimately familiar with it, like he knew it by heart. Reba McEntire, wearing a sequin jacket that caught the light like a sunset on the prairie and glimmered brilliantly, felt the draw shortly thereafter. Her gaze flickered across to the block button that read Michael, but her hand hovered over her button. She had previously been deceived by Bublé's talent for stealing away soulful artists with his charisma. Jazz's tone, on the other hand, was something Reba could sense was worth fighting for since it was honest, reverent, and fiercely unique. Jazz poured all of her feelings into the song, "My Lonely Days Are Over," as her voice rose to a crescendo. It was like a tidal wave of emotion that held the burden of every barren stage she had ever performed in the desolate bars of her past. Reba smashed the block button with her palm, and the panel belonging to Michael lit up with a glaring red block. Michael threw his hands up in feigned sorrow, causing the crowd to gasp and then burst out laughing. Niall Horan was the next to wake up. He tapped his foot to the rhythm of the syncopated music. Jazz was incorporated into the verse. The wording that she used bounced between several time signatures, which was an homage to the improvisational spirit of the jazz heritage of her city. And life is similar to a song. As she reached the final note, she added a playful scat, her voice skipping across the river like a stone, with each ripple that it left behind representing a new hue of happiness. With a broad smile on his face, Niall clapped his hands together as his chair spun around. "That's the stuff," he hollered, already seeing in his mind's eye inclined his head in agreement, his gold rings gleaming as his hands rested on the armrest. The laid-back beat that Jazz's voice possessed was something that he lived for. but it also had a church-born fire that brought to mind gospel choirs remixed for the streets. As she lowered her voice to a deep, gravelly "oh yeah, yeah," Snoop rotated his chair around, and the slow clap that he gave was a clear indication of his satisfaction. Leaning forward, he drawled, "You have that in soul, little mama. Let's generate some warmth." Michael did not let Reba's blockade discourage him, so he pressed his button, and his chair spun around as Jazz approached the bridge. Her voice rose in a measured crescendo that did more than just reach the notes. It caressed them, making each one a brushstroke on a canvas of quiet. The audience was standing up and swaying back and forth. Some of them had their hands lifted in the air as if they were in church. The glimmer in Michael's eyes was unmistakable. He could hear the influence of Ella Fitzgerald in her phrasing and Billie Holiday in her sorrow. But there was also something new, a spark that was purely jazz. When Reba's chair finally turned around, the audience burst into a frenzy of excitement. With her hands joined together, as if she were saying a prayer, she smiled, and her smile was like sunshine in the south. Jazz's conclusion at long last. It was a victory, a vocal run that spiraled like a hurricane, powerful yet graceful, concluding with a note that was so pure it appeared to remain suspended in the air like a star. For a brief period, the silence was holy, only interrupted by the deafening roar of the applause. Once the band's performance had finished, Jazz's chest was rising and falling rapidly as she stood there, and her smile was more brilliant than the light that was focused on her. The host made their entrance onto the stage, gripping a microphone in their hand. Reba used her block on Michael, and Jazz McKenzie, you are through to the next round thanks to a 4-chair turn. What does that sensation feel like? Jazz let out a chuckle that was reminiscent of the sound of wind chimes. I have essentially been singing about this moment my entire life, she stated in a voice that cracked with happiness. The coaches began to make their pitches immediately after that. Reba's drawl was as inviting as a hearth. She leaned forward with her voice like that. Darling, you have a natural talent for storytelling, which is the essence of country music. I blocked Michael because I know that you and I have the ability to create music that will rock the rafters. Niall, who was brimming with excitement, responded by saying, your voice is like a chameleon, able to change from pop to soul to jazz and everything in between. I can assist you in writing songs that will reach the top of the charts all around the world. With the wisdom that he was known for, Snoop suggested that you possess both that passion and that fluidity. We will create classics by blending some of the West Coast spirit with your heritage. Michael, who was wearing a smile despite the obstacle, told Jazz, you are a once-in-a-generation kind of talent. Regardless of that, I would have fought for you. Let's turn this into something that will never go out of style. The audience members shouted with excitement after every pitch, but Jazz couldn't keep his eyes off Reba. The country legend's look conveyed a sense of recognition and an understanding of what it meant to sing from the heart. Her voice remained level and unwavering as she addressed Jazz Miss Reba before she even looked around. I am at home with you. As soon as the audience started to roar, Reba sprung out of her chair and let out a whoop. Respect, Snoop said softly while raising an imaginary glass. Michael let out a teasing grunt, and Niall clapped his hands. As the stage was showered with confetti and Jazz embraced Reba, it became less like a platform and more like a crossroads. Her family watched the broadcast from the backstage, her uncle wiping tears at his New Orleans club. Jazz McKenzie had sang the heartbeat of her city, and 4 chairs had turned to listen to her. Jazz's journey had already reached an impressive height of success, but it was only the beginning of season 28.